What is this one again?
Make it so that it's facing me in the board.
Yeah.
Especially the board and me here.
Yeah. Should be good.
They were very passionate about their company. Yeah, I wanted that. More realistic.
So folks, get your name tags out. Let's get it going.
Do you have more sheets for now?
Vanessa, can you do me a favor? Go to one next doors and see if you can find some dark markers for me. Thank you. And then you can get one for yourself or your name. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna use this one.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Hello? Yeah, hold on. Okay, is this all set up? Let me just check here. Are we broadcasting live? Broadcasting live, and here we're broadcasting live. Perfect. Thank you so much. Here, can you give your phone? Can you just go out and then I'm going to send you a text, okay? And then introduce yourself. Yeah. Just go outside.
What is this thing? Like, how does this work?
It's just a phone. Okay, folks, welcome back. How are we? Let me just get my laptop going. Let's see if we can see something. Do we see something? Let's see. Yes, good. So I'm going to go to my live stream. We're live streaming here. And I'm going to go to events. And in my events, we have 5 o'clock, right? So I'm going to start my Google Hangouts on air. And I have my link that we're able to see. Questions before we begin. Everybody have your name tags out? Let's go. Okay. Let me close this. Close my program. Start my broadcast. I say okay. Starting. And going to share my screen. I need to be mic'd. Let's turn on my mic here. Questions before I begin? Okay, so today I want to cover some more database. I want to cover blockchain and some forecasting. Also, I'll answer any of your questions. I'll talk a bit about the exam. I'll talk about the format, which is multiple choice and open-ended questions. Remind me, you need to bring your picture ID. So jot it down. You need to bring your, Lawrence, jot it down, picture ID and pencils. Okay, you can bring pens too. There'll be two parts. One part will be similar to, it'll be taken from the book. On Monday, our exam was on Wednesday, so what's great is Monday I'm going to dedicate entirely to a review. So there won't be, I don't want there to be any surprises. Okay, so it's not I don't want a test to trick you, but I run a test that we can all finish up, that we all know the concepts, we all know the foundations, and then after we do the exam, we're going to work not only additionally on the rest of the book, but we're going to work on our projects. So we'll be spending more time on projects than we are, but this way, everybody gets down the foundations. Okay, so let me minimize this screen. I'm broadcasting now, and let me go to courses, right, miami.edu. I'm going to log in with my ID. I'm going to sign in. Okay, I'm going to go to, let me just do this. I'll go to our regular session, and then after a while, I'll go to our audit section, and I'll try to end a bit early today because a couple of you wanted me to help you with your forecasts. So what I want to do, since I have another class at 6:30, I want to spend some time with this class and devote it enough so those of you that have issues, I can devote it. How does that sound? All right? Yes? Okay, we're ready to go on that part. Let's go to BTE 210. Right, fundamentals of business technology and information. And one of the things, let's just do a couple of things that I'll cover today. I'll go over the PowerPoints, and especially I'll cover data, which will cover quite a bit, and make sure that that's up. So let me open that file. PowerPoint, just for us to use. So let me minimize and enable editing. Okay, and then the other one that I want to do in PowerPoint is 4, which is security. And let's open that. Okay, and enable editing. And a couple of others. Let's go back to J. Let me move this over here so we can see here. So we know we have the exam, right? And I'll talk about this as well. You see here, auto trading systems, blockchains, pros and cons. So let's go to web links. And we started a couple of web links I wanted to do. One is an important web link to look at for you to study for the exam. You have a couple of, here is what's the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain for business. But this one, I would concentrate on this one, which is blockchain, what are the applications? Let me open this up in a new tab. And I'll open up this one in a new tab as well. We'll look at both of these. So, and you can see some of these other. And the other one, later on we'll talk about, after the exam we'll talk about combining AI and blockchain. This was an article yesterday by the Wall Street Journal, the bots manipulating Bitcoin prices. Were you mentioning that, Michael, about what happened with when we have a number of computers, and if who was asking me that a number of computers, and if they're fast. This is interesting. What they're saying is everybody knows Bitcoin. How does Bitcoin? What can I do with forecasting in Bitcoin? Is it stable? Is it volatile? What do you think? It's very volatile, right? Bitcoin is very volatile. And this is an interesting article where they talk about bots. And what are bots? What are bots? Alec, what's a bot?
Bots are, it's like something like the way it's like computers, like automated something.
A bot, what do you know that, what word ends in the word bot? Robot, right? So it's a robot, it's a soft bot, and they use it as as a short way to talk about it as BOT, as a bot, and it's basically what? It's an automated short little program that does a certain task. So what these are, which are interesting, if you go back, and I put the article as well, it's in Wall Street, and sometimes they want you to subscribe. If you go to, let's see here, under course documents, go to course documents and readings, you'll see the same one here. Let me just open this. This was yesterday's Wall Street Journal, and they say bots, which you can put in your notes there, are like soft bots or robots with a computer. Bots are manipulating price of Bitcoin in the Wild West of crypto. And basically, it's interesting, you should read through this, but since there's a volatile, it's quite volatile, it's still unregulated, it's still so new, almost like the Wild West, is they are trying to manipulate those cryptocurrencies. They're not as regulated as the NASDAQ or the Dow. So what's interesting here is what they're saying, manipulation in cryptocurrencies is a growing concern for regulators and even some proponents of the digital coins. The SEC cited that risk in August when rejecting several Bitcoin-based exchange funds. And then what they go into is how these bots, when any venue tolerates manipulative, abusive contract, the integrity then of the entire is risk. Crypto traders, look at this. Crypto traders can create bots, right, Alec? And then you know that themselves or buy them online. So they basically are selling these bots. Just like if you were a hacker, and let's say, Alec, you wanted to be a hacker, you say, do you know programming, Alec?
Not really.
Not really. So he's trying to, so let's say you don't. Okay, let's say for namesake, for our discussion, you don't know any programming. What you can go is you can go to the internet and you can buy basically hacker tools. Somebody else programs it and you say, hey, for this amount of money, I'll buy it and all I have to do is run it. So now they're doing, so it's basically two sides of the coin. You know, we got the black hat and the white hat. So I have the white hat hacker trying to prevent it. I have the black hat hacker. Guess what? I'm going to set up some websites. Everybody's heard about the dark web, right, of what's going on in there. And they're basically saying, hey, I'm selling these. You can buy these. And so they create bots themselves, or they buy them online, and they establish markets then for then monitor for, so what they're doing is they're monitoring for illegal trading, punishing rule breakers, but crypto exchanges very widely in their surveillance editors. So here you can think about it is they lack oversight. So the result is that crypto bots can be used to execute abusive strategies on an industrial scale. And then they have some startup tokens. They're a fact of life, and which is interesting, and this guy here, Stefan, he runs his own bots on dozens of crypto exchanges around the world. It's a cat and mouse game with enemy bots. So it depends on one bot. You got some malicious ones. They create some good ones, right, trying to fight them out. It's almost like a war on engines here. We got it? Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Dan. So it's world, and then there's basically on harassing bots targeted, and they're trying to do the mining rig. They're talking about Ethereum. You remember yesterday, on Monday, we were talking about Ethereum cryptocurrency. So it's basically what happens, specializes in arbitrage, and then they're checking it. And seconds, the hostile bot would post orders to sell either a lower price than other sellers. They create almost like phishing bots where there's something like this. Anybody know what spoofing is? What's spoofing? Michael?
It's like, say you want to buy $50 million of like a stock, you put in a fake order.
It's fake order. So spoofing is used on the internet all the time. It's almost like malicious code. It's also, I'm purporting to look like someone else. Have you ever gotten those emails that look like someone else, but it's really not them, right? They spoof basically, like I'm Bank of America, but I'm not Bank of America. I basically, what is a website? A website is what? HTML code. What does somebody do? They just copy that website and they make it look like their own. It's almost like forgery. So spoofing is forgery. So it's here in these bots is spoofing, a practice which traders enter fake orders only to cancel them. And the tactic is what? Is basically to look like there's a lot of activity. So they're basically, it's interesting, they're tricking them, and then tweaks, it's algorithm stuff being gamed. So basically they're talking about how Bitcoin was conceived and then how it was started, and they're trying now to ban the manipulation by giving sophisticated manipulation tools to small traders. So here is kind of an interesting article that just came out, and among the most notorious abuses are pump and dump schemes, in which traders talk up the price of cryptocurrency before dumping it for a profit, hurting investors who bought as the price topped out. So they're manipulating a lot. Bots make it easier to pump digital currencies, and what they call whale containing automated tools for executing several abusive strategies. Remember I was talking about quant traders getting 200 grand? Most of these quant traders, or 99% of them, are legitimate. But when you have this new system, basically, the black hat or the white hat, it can be used if it's not regulated. Even if it is regulated, the people are trying to fool the one. So it's the idea, right? Manipulating one of these called ping pong. Amazing. Lets the users execute simultaneously, buy and sell orders to themselves, creating a mirage of intense activity. Tactic known as whitewash trading, illegal, right? It isn't clear here. The Wild West would last much longer. So U.S. Justice Department, Commodities and Futures Trading Commission is basically investigating. So this is kind of the original story. This was just yesterday. See that guy on Monday? He doesn't have much more experience than you guys. It's amazing, right? He's already started that company now. He got a job right after undergraduate. Deloitte hired him just like they could hire you. He went, and what group did he go to? Deloitte and all those accounting firms, they smell money too. Everybody's sniffing for, where's the next thing? So they sniffed, and they said, hey, we're going to set up a blockchain group. Started with 12 people and went to, hundreds of people. They don't have any idea either. But they basically started, and there was one startup that was gonna start a platform. So they were helping that one startup. So a bunch of these guys went out with this startup and said, you know what we can do is we can start raising money for you. Where should we start raising money for kind of like blockchain? Where would you start raising it? Let's move over to Silicon Valley, right? Los Gatos, right? Which is in Silicon Valley, started, and now they're trying to raise money on this platform. Who knows if it's gonna work? But what it is, it's kind of like the beginning that they can kind of do it. I see that if they can start this, and even if they don't succeed, they're already ahead of the game in terms of where blockchain is and basically a platform. So Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency to use blockchain as its cryptocurrency. So read through this so you can get a feel for it. Put that in your notes then. So for reading in terms here, I put that under readings. So that's under, let me just put it here so you can do it. So that's under documents, readings. And basically what I want you to get out of it is what? That what's a bot, right? Alec already was talking about it. And basically we can have what I call white and black hackers, you know, and basically that since that Bitcoin is so new and it's not regulated well, there's a lot of manipulation there. And that's why it's kind of like volatile, and that's why the Securities and Exchange Commission is coming. So I invited some attorneys. Anybody want to go to law school? That's a big area now. I mean, I've invited some attorneys that are specializing just in blockchain and writing up the contracts. You remember they were talking about smart contracts. Basically, also law, it'll be blockchain, but just helping other companies go through the regulations because now it's being regulated. And what turns out is this now becomes more and more regulated of what I can, how can I raise money. Can I raise money from the United States? Do I have to go outside to raise money? Okay, so this was under course documents. And the other one that I want you to look under is under web links. And under web links, especially what I want you to look at, blockchain, what are the applications? What are the applications? And let's go to that. So this whole area of blockchain, the purpose is to be more efficient. The purpose is to eliminate intermediaries. It is blockchain when we talked about database management systems, and really why I'm continuing with this. Do I have an eraser? When I think about, you remember we talked about a database management system? Where was my data stored? Zach, where was my data stored?
It's with the database management system, it's not in files. It's centralized so that it's spread everywhere.
It's centralized so I can query, right? Make queries. This is a review. So let's say this was the School of Business. Let's say this was the Wellness Center. And let's say this was the registrar. You remember? And let's say this was Housing. And what's contained, Zach, what's contained in the centralized database?
Your data that you're then going to disperse to all your.
Right, that I can query. So basically, let's say I had a student database, right? This could be a student database. And then later on, there could be, let's say, a faculty database. And there could be an employee database. Right? But my centralized student database, I can make queries. And what kind of language usually did they use to query database? Aren't we glad we don't have the exam today? Yes, Vanessa.
SQL.
SQL is a structured query language, and that basically means that I have tables, right, Vanessa? I have tables, and we said tables are, my columns are my what? My fields are my attributes, my rows are my second Vanessa is what? What are my rows called in database terms? Who can tell me?
Records?
Records, very good. Rows and record, basically I have my fields and records, and what I'm going to be able to is query. Give me all those students that are finance majors that have GPAs greater than 3.0 and live in New York. So I can give them an internship when they go in the summer. Or live in the northeastern section. Or basically are interested in internships. Or give me all those, right, query, whereas the gender is female and are business students and have GPAs greater than 3.5, I want to give scholarships. Got it? Yes? No? Andre, how we doing? Okay? So I have here the centralized database. What's the difference in blockchain? Where do I have my data? How many times do I have my data stored in database management systems? Good question for the exam. Jamie, how many times do I store? How many times is in a constructive database management system, and we had your, let's say, your demographic data? How many times would it be stored? Would it be stored more like one time or more like 1,000 times?
1,000.
In a database management system.
Yeah.
What's in the middle here? Centralized data. It may be retrieved 1,000 times. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Retrieving 1,000 times, but how many times do we store it?
Once.
Exactly. You're working with me, right? We rehearsed it, huh?
Yeah, we did.
We did. It almost looked natural, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did. So we have many times we're going to query my database, right? Put that in your notes here. That many times I'm going to query my database, but my data can be stored. But what I probably have to do is I have to give it back up in recovery. So right here, Jamie, I don't want it because what's the problem here? So in a blockchain, how many times, Michael, do I store my data?
It's one copy, but it's distributed across.
Right, it's going to be that copy, and it's going to be distributed many times across the chain. And it's what they call peer-to-peer technology. So put in your notes, it's peer-to-peer. So what's the difference? This is a good question. This is a good test question. What's the difference between peer-to-peer technology and a centralized database management system? Don't look at me.
For the peer-to-peer, there's like no intermediary.
Okay, but what else? So look it up. What is peer-to-peer technology? What do we get? Dan, do we get something?
The peers of computer systems connected to each other via the internet. Files can be shared directly without the need of central server.
Without need, beautiful. Read it out loud with more oomph.
Files files can be shared directly between systems on the network without need of a central server.
Files can be shared directly without the need of a central server. In database management system, Jamie, do I have a centralized server or is it peer-to-peer?
Centralized.
It's centralized, right? I'm going to be, it may be getting that data 1,000 times. Your data may be, I may request Jamie's data 1,000 different times, right? From the School of Business. What's your major, Jamie?
I'm
Undeclared, so it's even more. I want to find all those students that are undeclared that are females because I want to do a special session in women in technology. Right? I want to find all those people that are undeclared and try to rev them up to say, hey, there's opportunities. And then I want to find out in terms of housing, in terms of the wellness center and so forth. But peer-to-peer means that I can directly then, Jamie, send my data to you and it can go along the chain. So the chain is Daniel and then Chris and then Jackie and then Andre and then Jamie, and we go along the list. And think about every person in this can hold then the data. So what we have is peer-to-peer, which can be stored globally on thousands of servers. So put in your notes here, my regular database management system is what? Where is it going to be stored? Centralized, right? And AJ, in terms of blockchain, how is it going to be stored then? It can be thousands of servers, and anyone in the network can see anyone else's entries in real time. So I'm going to eliminate a lot of those. And what they're doing is now it is very rudimentary in its beginnings. And where it really fits and what applications it fits is when, for instance, I want to hold on to my data. So think about healthcare. What do you have in this case, Vanessa? I'm going to go to my second row. I have my data. You have your records, right? Where's your records now in healthcare? Where's it stored? Have you ever gone to a doctor before?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where have you gone to a doctor before? Where in the world?
LA.
LA. Have you gone here at all? And if you wanted, where would you go? If you got sick, where would you go?
The health center.
The health center. So they would have your record as well. And then, God forbid, they say, you know what? I think, you need to go to the hospital. And you say, you're not going to go, and you're not that bad off, so you're not going to go back to LA, right? So you're going to go to Coral Gables, but let's say you go back to LA. And you go back and you go see your doctor in LA. Do they have your data from Miami? No. But what would you want? In terms of people are thinking in healthcare, what would they want is you hold on to your healthcare record on the blockchain. And what is the blockchain? It's just a chain that you can think about it of blocks of your data going along the chain. So I have here, Vanessa, what's your last name, Vanessa?
Kashkarian.
And what's the first
K.
K? So we're going to have VK here, okay? So I got VK, BC, VK along the chain. And now when you go to LA, you have your whole data there. And what you're going to do, she's going to give permission for the doctors to see her data. So she's going to hold on to her data. But where is it now? It's dispersed in many different locations. So in this case, then the networking here for economic, social systems, there's so much that's going in, and it's disruptive of the traditional business models with lower cost solutions that overtakes it. So the lower cost solutions is what they want to have issues where I can track data. So one application could be healthcare. Another application is in the food chain and supply chain. Anybody been to Chipotle? Anybody's ever eaten there? Who's eaten there? Who can admit it? I've never eaten there. But what do we hear? That somehow, what's the problem with that we hear in the news all the time? Huh?
Ebola.
Yeah, right, Ebola or salmonella, right? From what? And they always say, I don't know, was it the lettuce? Was it tomato? Maybe that's the reason I've never eaten there. You know what I mean? Somehow, you know what I mean? I'm a curious eater, but not, when I hear that, it doesn't look that appetizing. But what is the idea here is where did it come from? Basically, was it from the store that somebody had hepatitis and then washed their hands? Or was it from the fields in Mexico, in organic lettuce? Sometimes I think Mexico and organic lettuce go together. You know what I mean? Anybody been to Mexico, right? You ever gone to see, I'm thinking organic lettuce may not be, maybe I don't want organic lettuce, I don't know, but in terms here is where did that lettuce come from? So it's basically the supply chain that we think about. A lot of times they think about, the diamond industry. I don't want to have blood diamonds. I want to be able to track along the way in terms of the supply chain. So they're conceptually looking at it, and conceptually they said the problems here are the problems with blockchain. First, you need to know this. What are the problems, the pros and the cons? Blockchain is slow. Why do you think it's slow? Cameron, why do you think it's slow?
There's changes that are happening very quickly.
Why is it slow? First of all, let's go back to Jamie's point, right, that she told us that the regular database management system, where's the data? How many times is it's stored? Once, right? So the database is stored once. How many times is it stored along the chain? It travels along the chain, so is it stored more than once? Your data may be in thousands of servers. So as it goes along, because of the technology, then it's still very slow. MasterCard and Visa are considering doing pilot studies to get into blockchain as well. But what are they saying now prevents them? Speed. Because how many transactions? You can't do it every 12 seconds for a transaction. If we wanted to be for education, for instance, if I wanted education and I wanted to be on the blockchain, and what do you have? You have your educational record here. And maybe what I do here is, you see how we're broadcasting? We can maybe disrupt education and say what? We can allow people from around the world to enter our class, right? And you're here, and what we can say here is, Michael, basically, maybe we'll then give you a token to help in the class, and when there's people from the outside asking questions, or we want to start helping in terms of the chat room, or people asking questions, or you can raise your hand and you can say, Dr. Rush, you know what? There's somebody in India that has an interesting question that has information on blockchain. Maybe then we could reward you in terms of giving a utility token or some kind of token that's involved. So along that way, basically, they're saying it's slow and it needs then momentum here to go through it. So basically, it's in the early stage. And here are the questions. These are great questions. And these questions would be great questions for the exam. What does blockchain do? What is blockchain? What does it do? How secure is blockchain? The difference between public versus private blockchains. What do you think the difference is? What does it sound like? Rob, what does it sound like?
Public or private?
Yeah. What do you think a blockchain, a public, and a private is? Bitcoin, you think is public or private?
Public.
Public, because everybody can do it. Private would be what?
Like maybe peer-to-peer.
Blockchain is always peer-to-peer, but what would be a private blockchain? Would be that we don't want the whole public to be in it. We could create a blockchain, for instance, for just, let's say we're banks, and we just wanted to then transfer money among different banks, that's not gonna be public, it will be just between banks. Or let's say we wanted to do a supply chain, and I only wanted my suppliers and our businesses to be in it, we don't want it out for the public, we just want it for a select group. That's called private. We still want to share that information. We still want, you got it, Rob? We
Yeah.
still want it, makes sense, we still want it. So there are different flavors of the blockchain. They say, I don't want all my information out there for everybody to see, right? So in this case, that's the difference between public and private. And which industries use blockchain? What I'd like you to do is do research and the industry that you're interested in. Who's marketing here? Anyone? Marketing, look at research and look at blockchain and marketing. Those of you that are in entrepreneurs, blockchain versus like entrepreneurs. If you're in finance, blockchain and finance. If you're in accounting, blockchain and accounting, and see what kind of applications people are thinking about in or blockchain and business, blockchain and e-commerce. And see what it is, and here you have which industries use it. Blockchain and fintech, you can think here, is going to be, people are thinking, hey, that's going to be a big blockchain and energy, blockchain and mobile, blockchain and healthcare, and how is blockchain likely to evolve? So here the key is, it's an electronic ledger that can be, here's the key, openly shared among disparate user and creates an unchangeable record of their transactions. So put in your notes here, blockchain is unchangeable. Another word for blockchain is immutable. So Chris, what's immutable mean? Do you know?
No, I don't. Unchangeable.
Unchangeable, right. That you can't change it. So what do people like about it? That has more security to it. So the idea of unchangeable and immutable is each one is time-stamped and linked to what? The previous one. Each a digital record or transaction is called a block. Hence the name, and allows you to have a set users to participate in this ledger. Okay? And blockchain can only be updated by consensus between participants in the system. When the new data is entered, it never can be erased. Write once, append many times. Okay? And then you can see here they have crypto, so it has a lot of cryptology. It's secure. Write once, append only, distributed and completely or partially replicated. Decentralized in its pure form. In its pure form, it's decentralized. What's my DBMS, Jamie? Decentralized or centralized? My database management system is centralized. Blockchain is decentralized. We rehearsed it well. Okay, so it is in its infancy. It's starting. It's really another one. And then they talk about another example, Ethereum. We looked at that on Monday. Doesn't support. Linux Foundation has created tools. Linux is open source. They're trying to do some things. They're trying to do standardization. It's getting so much buzz here. It's peer-to-peer. We talked about Ethereum, right? And here we can see here. We got block 1, block 2, block 3. We got the transactions here. And Cameron, you know what a great specialization is?
What?
Blockchain auditing.
I'm into it.
So it's basically, because you ask a regular accountant, they have no idea what blockchain is, and plus, somebody has to start auditing these
I know
systems.
exactly what blockchain is, I'm gonna get into that.
So basically, what I'm telling you here is then there's a whole evolution, and that's why somebody like Deloitte and all the big four then are creating these terms, because they're gonna need auditors, basically go to these systems that nobody's even familiar with. They had problems in electronically trying to figure out what's happening, but because it's over the entire centralized, it's hard to control as well. So these are our areas on how to secure the blockchain. So in order to move anything of value over any kind of blockchain, the network of nodes first must agree that the transaction is valid. When does this really work well also in blockchain is when I don't know who my other partner is. For trust then, for a trustless interaction, it really lends itself well to blockchain. So they talk about here how secure is the blockchain. In its early stage, a number of challenges need to be transparency versus privacy. Because what did people, who used to purchase then Bitcoin? It was basically all my drug dealers and my gun dealers, right? And all my underworld, right? Why did they love it? Because it was immutable, because it was privacy. But one of the things is banks, for instance, there's something called KYC. Anybody know what that is in a bank?
Know your customer.
Know your customer is how can I know my customer when I have all those guys that are trying to evade the law. So here you have the problems of transparency versus privacy, immutability. What's immutability then? Chris?
It says it's unchanging.
Unchanging versus exception management. And then we have something called smart contracts. Smart contracts are just the rules to tell me something's going to be installed. So Sam, for instance, wants to go to law school, just like I said, Cameron here, in terms of accounting, what Sam can then even specialize is in writing smart contracts for blockchains. So basically people say, I don't even know, somebody needs to audit those to see are they valid, just like any other. Smart contracts are not smart, nor are they contracts in the legal sense. It's really about the business process automation, and we'll talk about that in the future. So you can see here, public versus private blockchains. We talked about that, Rob, right? There's a violation, meaning in two categories. Public allows anyone to see or send, and they're consortiums where only a pre-selected number of nodes are authorized to use the ledger. Group of banks, right, are part of it, trading clearinghouses, and private then, right, to a distributed ledger, such as a group of employees within a corporation. Which industries use it? You can think about it in shipping. Here's examples. There's a lot of examples. This one, anybody hear about this company, Maersk? They're basically a shipping operator. You always see them in the news here. They've announced in 2017 they're using a blockchain to manage the paper trail of tens of millions of shipping containers by digitizing the supply chain. And they teamed up with IBM now for electronic basic shipping. Blockchain and fintech, financial services. Accenture, anybody hear about them? Big consulting firm recently a report claiming blockchain could reduce infrastructure costs for 8 of the 10 investment banks by an average of 30%. What are we doing? Taking out those intermediaries. Basic cross-border payments. So basically, I have to pay. I don't have to worry about that. Payments and clearance, because I'm going what? Peer-to-peer, Jamie, rather than the centralized. I don't have to wait for the banks for 2 or 3 days. You can listen to these guys, and then you can go on next, that you can see it. Why I like this article here is you can see here it really extends it to the most here. The largest blockchain payment networks, JP Morgan. Anybody hear about them? Sure. They're getting the blockchain to reduce the number of participants needed to respond to compliance. Anytime I have a lot of rules, I want to MasterCard is launching its own blockchain network to enable partner banks to make cross-border payments faster, more securely. So the cross-payment is kind of an interesting idea when I have pesos, I have euros that I can go through. So that is the one. And then, remember chapter 5 is database? Blockchain technology, a very special kind of distributed database. What's the difference between blockchain and distributive technology? So here is an article that is called Centralized Relation Databases, Organized Data in Tables, and guess what? We use SQL language. Have you heard of that? Yes. They became the norm in the 80s. Even the artistic, they remain basically essentially centralized, located, stored, and maintained in a single location. Maintained in a single location. 90% of the market in terms of revenues are MySQL. Anybody hear about them? Put it in your notes. MySQL. It seems like it uses what language? MySQL uses what language? SQL. Wow, what a class. SQL. And MySQL is an open source, you think, or proprietary? Because you know what I like? Free, right? So you think it's open source or proprietary? Open source. Open source, and it's used a lot on the internet. So if you want to create an app, and we'll do some app building in this class after the exam, we're going to do some app building. And in terms of the apps, what do you want on the back end? You want the front end to look good, but you want to store your customers. You want to store your potential users, your subscribers. What do you use? You need a database. What do usually people use? MySQL. Because why do they like it? A lot of people know SQL, structured query language, and what else do they like? Free. So we got both together. Isn't that wonderful? So I got here MySQL. Everybody has heard, a lot of people have heard of Oracle, right? They're a big one. People have heard of Microsoft, IBM, SAP. Don't worry about the rest. But basically, that's the traditional database management systems. And what I have here is I have distributed database management systems that databases are distributed when the storage devices are not all attached to a common process unit called CPU. You remember we talked about that central processing unit? So I have my central processing unit, but they're spread across the network. And what they have in large companies, think about Amazon. Anybody ever use Amazon? Think about Google. Anybody ever use Google? Do you think they have just one server? What do you think, Kelsey? No. How many? Thousands, right? And you think they have it in one location?
No, it's probably not much location.
Across the world, right? They even have some in China that are only just for the Chinese. They have in Europe. They have in the United States. Do they have in one place in the United States? No. Why? Because if there's a hurricane in Florida or North Carolina, what's going to happen to my systems? They're going to go down, and what do I want to have? I want to have backup. And what I have in terms of backup, they call it then, put this in your notes, fault tolerant. Fault tolerant. And what do you think it means? Want to take a guess? Kelsey, what does fault tolerant mean? You know what tolerant means? What's tolerant mean in general? If someone's tolerant, what does it mean?
They're putting up with something.
They're putting up with something, right? And fault tolerant means what? That if there are faults going on, I can take it. So my database, if my system goes down, the database can survive, can tolerate it, and I'll have some kind of backup. I'll have some other storage along the network. That's all. So basically, look at this. Peer network nodes are systems that users replicate share flags across the network, peer-to-peer protocols. And this is what they used a lot when they were trying to bypass some rules. When people said you couldn't download files, they used, anybody hear of these, BitTorrent, Freenet? They basically were used to distribute. And distribute SQL, we all know what a data warehouse is. Hadoop, anybody hear about Hadoop? Put this in your notes. Hadoop. Anybody hear about big data? Yes? Big data requires many times tools to analyze large amounts of data. I'm talking about millions, trillions of records. In order to do this, many people use this open source software framework to deal with that big data. To do, anybody hear about machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning? It's many times people are using this framework called Hadoop. So when any of you go for job interviews, you're going to be knowing more than the recruiter. Okay. We talked about a standard structured query language is called what? SQL. This is called, put this in your notes, NoSQL. It's a non-relational distributed database management system that's horizontally scalable. That means that I can grow the data, designed for real-time web applications. Think about something like YouTube. Anybody been to YouTube before? Right, Lawrence, you been to YouTube? You think they have a few videos there?
Yeah,
A couple, more than a couple, how many? Millions and millions, and every day, you have a channel there, Lawrence?
No, I don't.
But if you opened up a channel, how many videos could you upload? Unlimited. It seems like unlimited amounts. So something like this, designed for real-time web applications, and what did we say here? That relational databases were for structured data, but if we're starting with Lawrence there and he's going to upload videos, it can be unstructured data. So there needs to be now what they just put in your notes here, NoSQL, when I have loads of amounts of data files that are uploaded that I don't know what's going to be happening to them. So you can think about there's going to be new ways to do that. And then they talk about distributed, hold on. Bitcoin was the first instance then when we talk about distributed ledger. Our leverage cryptography provides a decentralized, right? Jamie was talking about decentralized, multi-version concurrency control to maintain consensus, meaning that we decide upon the existence of shared facts in a trustless environment. So put the word trustless, that I don't necessarily know who's on the other side, that I don't necessarily know who I'm selling my house to. If I'm in a trustless, then I'm going to be using then that distributed ledger. And then this person starts talking about it here, and consensus here. Here they have algorithms that they share. And here they're talking about Bitcoin as being one, some of those, Ethereum being another, and DL stands for distributed ledger, envisioned by Accenture is not immutable. They're talking about R3 Corda is used by a number of financial institutions trying to do my back blockchain. Some of this is too technical, but what do I want to do? Okay, so this is basically it, this diagram. Centralized database, SQL, right? MySQL, we talked about it. Distributed databases here, we talked about it, is that NoSQL, the Hadoop, the distributed SQL, and then a new one here is distributed ledgers, being my blockchain. So it's kind of, you can see it as an entire section of databases. And basically, these are kind of questions that I wanted you to see. Let me see here, and that's the sources. So basically, to understand that difference of the distributed ledger versus a traditional centralized unit. What else did I want to cover? So that'll be one of the that'll be one of the topics of the open-ended question will be about blockchain. And we've gone over that today of what is it, what is the difference between that, for instance, Jamie, what's the difference between that of a regular database management system versus something like blockchain where we're distributing that data along that way. So it has in some applications, and then read upon, we'll meet again on Monday, read upon those applications that it seems like blockchain is really strong in. So I'm going to do two things on Monday. I'm going to do an extensive review for the exam, and then I'll stay now and go over your homeworks with the forecast, help people, you can stay with me in the class. And then the third part is I'll go over the open-ended. So it'll be on that and kind of the automated trading systems and forecasts. So what I think you should do is between now and then is go over the end of the, people were asking me, go over the PowerPoints, because there's a lot of material, so you want to be concise, you don't have a lot of time. Go over the PowerPoint, the quizzes that you took online, the key, what do they have, like the key terms or something. And if you have questions, what I don't want to do is go through it. I want to emphasize those questions. If you ask me a question, I say, I'll answer it, or I say, don't worry about it. You know, I want to be efficient, and I said, we'll do that. And then go over those readings and say, I didn't understand this in readings. Can you ask your other members? And then if they can't answer it, come back to me and say, can you explain this? So I want everyone to do well. So stay with me if you want to go over for your homeworks. Thank you. My pleasure. Hi. So what's up? Hi.
I just redid it yesterday because
Yeah.
I didn't really like the way mine turned out.
Okay.
So I did JD.
Okay.
So